I want to finish up a little bit on this James Kirk Wall. Love a guy who is proud that he was named after a starship captain.
I was not named after a starship captain. I was named after the starship captain.
But he is an atheist, and he has a fundamental disagreement with me that I talk about, that rights come from God. And he is trying to make this case that rights don't come from God, and he is trying to do it by saying, that
look at the laws that have changed over time.
Changing. God wanted you to drink or not drink.
Mind?
Those are laws. Those are not rights. Those are laws.
The rights in question are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Obviously, laws have an impact on your liberty, what you can do, what you are free to do in a society.
He says some claim acknowledgement that laws come from mankind equals submissive compliance to whatever laws people make. Actually, the opposite of true. Since laws come from people, they can be protested and changed by people if they are perceived to be wrong. Yes, James, but you're confusing laws with rights. If rights come from people, then they can be taken away.
Human rights are violated and taken away all the time.
For instance, in China, the people have rights. We know it. They're living in abject poverty and slavery of a system. And we know that if they come over here, they have the same rights that we have. If they are over there, if you were over there, James, if suddenly, let's say there was a transporter, and you could say, beam me to China, and it beamed you over to China, you would say, but wait, I have rights. No.
This man doesn't recognize those.
Yes, they would say, where do you think you are, America?
So citizens of China don't have the same rights as citizens of the United States. Doesn't that prove my point?
No, we have laws, and this man who's in charge, he's the one who says who has rights and who doesn't have rights.
As opposed to a man claiming to speak for God, saying who has rights and who doesn't have rights, such as in Saudi Arabia, such as in Iran.
You have no rights.
That man, like you, James, doesn't believe that rights come from God, so you don't have
any ways to go. You have no place to go.
Well, there is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the UN, drafted in 1948, so I guess that's a place to go.
There's no place to go because there is no higher authority than the man in charge.
And how is that any different than a man in charge who claims to speak for God?
So, would you say, James, that the people in China have a right to be free?
From a philosophical argument, absolutely.
Do they have a right to be free? Do they have a right to speak their mind? Do they have a right to protest? Do they have a right to not have their doors broken down in the middle of the night and hauled off to jail?
He would have to say no.
You would have to say no.
Because
in
the
China,
men in China have decided no.
Right.
I'd have to say no. If I believe in the rights that United States citizens have, why wouldn't I believe in those rights for other people? I would have to say no. Unbelievable.
No, correct. So it's not about taking away your rights. If you're looking at all laws come from God, well, then you are talking about a theocracy. If you're talking about all rights come from God, you're talking about freedom. Because then man cannot touch those rights.
Those rights are touched all the time. I'm not sure what world Glenn Beck is living in. Who determines what a right from God is? That would be men.
And that is really important for not only James T. Kirk, the Starship Enterprise captain who slept with the green lady, and also is apparently now an atheist. Mm-hmm. If it is James, not T. Kirk, but James Kirk Wall, the atheist. You would have to understand then that we don't disagree with each other. If I was saying that all laws come from God, then you would have a complaint with me, but I'm not. I'm not. Laws come from man, and laws change. And that's why you want to have as few of those as you possibly can. You don't want to have pages and pages and pages of regulation, because those come from man.
And they directly affect our liberty, our rights, what we're allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do.
But you and I both know, whether you live here or whether you live in China, people have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
We believe that they should have the right. Believing that somebody should have a right doesn't magically make it happen. If somebody is arrested and murdered for doing something, then they don't have the right. You can say it's a violation of their rights. You can fight for their rights, but the fact that you're fighting means they don't have it.
And those are not changeable. And James, who gives you those rights?
The development of moral reasoning that's happened over thousands of years.
It is not man.
Look behind the curtain, Glenn. It's a man.
Now, you can call it a space octopus. You can call it the grand universe. But you know it to be true. Whether you believe in God or not, you know it to be true. No man is born a slave. If they are, then what's wrong with slavery? What is wrong with enslaving somebody else?
The founding fathers did not end slavery. At the birth of this country, there were slaves. There were slave masters who believed they had the right to own other human beings. And that right came from God. And if you try to take those rights away, or you try to do something like that, you could start a civil war.
If men are not born with the right to be free, what is wrong with slavery?
The founding fathers did not end slavery.
But we all instinctively know that all men are born free. They are born and created equal. Now,
the institution of slavery was supported for hundreds of years, so people back then didn't know that all men deserved to be free. Why do we have this knowledge now? That would be an accumulation of the greatest moral thinking. That'd be accumulation of moral philosophy, understanding human rights. This was progress that took a long time to achieve. The God word doesn't play into this because it wasn't always like this. It's something that evolved. Slavery was legal, it was supported, and now slavery is illegal. I mean, here he's bringing up slavery as the biggest example of rights. Well, it used to be legal, now it's not, now it's illegal, but oh yeah, that's laws. Laws have nothing to do with rights whatsoever. Glenn Beck can't help but stick his foot in his mouth.
what you do after that is up to you. So, James, you have a fundamental misunderstanding here. And he goes on to quote, I can't believe it. He said, today at the dinner table, ask your kids where your rights come from. I have rights, you know. Really? From where? Push them. Teach them a lesson. He's quoting me. Because if you don't push them now, they'll be pushed and shoved and shot by religious fanatics later. Okay, well, maybe the ones who are shooting people are the religious fanatics in the Middle East that our current collectivist government that is denying God is siding with. So, no. But your kids may be shot by religious fanatics or blown up that believe that their laws, Sharia law, that's not rights. That's Sharia law. That all laws are to be dictated by God.
But according to Islam, Sharia law comes from God. And in the Bible, you have the laws of Moses, which the practicing Jews believe came from God, and the practicing Christians believe, well, a few of them came from God.
That's not what I believe. That's not what the Christians that I know believe. They believe all rights are. Laws are done by man. He said, He wants to end it with a quote from George Washington. The foundation of our empire was not laid in a gloomy age of ignorance and superstition, but an epoch when the rights of mankind were better understood and more clearly defined than any other period. George Washington. Bizarre to end. No, it's not. I mean, ignorant to end this with a quote from George Washington.
So it's bizarre and ignorant that I'm using a fantastic quote from George Washington about the foundation of this country. I'm not stating, nor did I imply in the slightest, that George Washington was an atheist.
Of all of the founders to end with. Because George Washington also said, James Kirk Wall, it is impossible to rightly govern the world without God and the Bible. George Washington.
Glenn Beck was called out for misquoting George Washington. He never said that. There's no primary source of history backing that up. And I'll include a link to that article calling him out in the description of this video.
The propitious smile of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right which heaven itself has ordained. George Washington. What students would learn in American schools above all is the religion of Jesus Christ. That would be George Washington. It is the duty of all nations to acknowledge his providence, the providence of Almighty God, to obey his will, to be grateful for his benefits, and humbly implore his protection and favors. George Washington. I could go on.
And there was another misquote, but keep going on. I love the Bible, George Washington. I love Jesus, George Washington. I say Jesus 100 times a day, George Washington. Once again, I never stated or implied that George Washington was an atheist. Here is the quote from George Washington, and unlike half of Glenn Beck's quotes, he actually said this. This is traceable to a primary source of history, to a document. And here's what he said. George Washington is talking about the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, an intellectual and philosophical movement that changed the world. Legislators, philosophers, sages, over a long succession of years, a collection of knowledge and wisdom. When you look at the foundation of the United States, it is a collection. You have influence from the ancient Greeks, who created the first democracy, ancient Romans, who created the first republic. You have influence from philosopher John Locke, social contract theory, more ancient Greek influence. You have influence from the 6 nations of the Cherokee Confederacy, Native American influence, where the structure of how they were governing was put into place partly in the way that we built our structure. So as George Washington put it, a cumulative effort, a succession of philosophers, legislators, sages, over a long succession of years, this collective wisdom. And I can't think of a more noble foundation for a country than that.
James Kirk. But I know you have, planets and stuff to go visit and places to explore that no man has gone before. It would make a lot of sense if you would look things up.
So the guy who misquoted George Washington twice and apparently thinks that the Founding Fathers ended slavery is going to give me a lecture on looking things up.
And he would look up the meaning of rights and the definition of rights and the definition of laws. I highly recommend, James Wall, that you would read our Founding Fathers and read on what they actually believed.
And perhaps do some research on what they actually said.
and look at it in some other place other than Atheist Illustrated, or if that exists. I don't know where you're getting your information. But actually look into it with an open mind, because atheists can come to an understanding and be totally cool with natural rights. Nature's God and nature's rights.
The greatest moral reasoning of mankind is what I refer to it as.
Different than man's laws. And I mean, you know, if you are just a guy who was named after a Star Trek character, and that's as deep as it goes, well, then I understand. I mean, Gene Roddenberry was an atheist, and but the men who founded this nation were not atheists. So you keep your prime directive. I'll hold fast to the divinely inspired United States Constitution and rights, where I know the difference between the two.
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. Your rights can be violated and taken away, and if that happens, there's no God from the skies that's going to come down and save you, so you better call Saul. Until next time.
Cisco, do we have to leave all our good friends now? Only until next time, Pancho. Adios, amigos.